হ্যাঁ
ঠিক করে দে জয়।
হ্যাঁ দেখছি 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 আচ্ছা আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে হুম হুম দেখছি দেখছি হ্যাঁ
Good evening, everybody. I sincerely hope I'm audible as well as visible. Am I audible and visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Oh, that's great. Okay, thank you so much for the response. Well, now we are alive, very much alive in this session. Well, welcome everybody. Good evening to the 7th-day web workshop on women's writing and popular literature. Just a minute.
আরে আমাকে সবসময় এখানে থাকতে হয়, জয়েন করছে না সবাই, আমি অ্যাকসেপ্ট না করলে জয়েন করতে পারবে না, প্রত্যেক মুহূর্তে আমাকে অ্যাকসেপ্ট করতে হচ্ছে। হ্যাঁ
Well, once again, welcome everybody. That we have been joined by students, teachers, academicians, research scholars from all over the country, and this is the sixth day of the 7-day web workshop. That means that this is the penultimate day, and so this is a day. Of course, it is one of the I would say most awaited days because we have got a brilliant speaker, distinguished speaker for today's session. I'm just going to introduce her to you, but before that, I would like to say that we have got a welcome note from none other than the Honorable Principal of Shantipur College. This workshop is being organized by Department of English, Shantipur College. Dr. Chandra Bhattacharya, she has conveyed her very warm wishes for today's event. She says, and I quote, "Today is the 6th day of the web workshop of English Department of Shantipur College. I convey my heartiest congratulations to all teachers, students, academicians, everybody who is joining, who have raised their helping hands to conduct this wonderful and very effective web seminar. I also convey my heartiest congratulations to the speaker, today's speaker, and I'm very much grateful to the head of the Department of English, Dr. Animan Bhattacharya, and Professor Subrata Ray, who have raised their helping hands to conduct this web workshop. I wish every success of today's happening. So thank you, ma'am, for your warm wishes, and I have tried to convey it, air it all across the participants. Today, we have been thinking that it's been quite a beautiful journey, productive journey for the last almost 1 week, and right from the beginning, 25th of August, when we had the inaugural speech from Dr. Shankar Kumar Ghosh, Honorable VC, University of Kalani, And then we have got a very rich panel of outstanding resource persons, and the number of responses, their gratitude, their reflections, their observations have been absolutely phenomenal. So we have been thinking that what is the mystery of it? What could be the mystery? It remains a mystery, and so when the question of mystery comes, then we need to have a detective to unfold the mystery. And I'm very happy to let you know that yes, we are going to deal with such a character who is quite well known all across the globe in the world of literature for his unique skill of solving various mysteries. So okay, now let me have the honor to introduce today's distinguished resource person. I'm quite sure, no matter how sincere and how dedicated I am to my effort, but it will be an inefficient effort to sketch even a brief, picture of today's speaker. Today's speaker is Professor Dr. Paramita Mukherjee. Welcome, ma'am, to our show today. It's been so wonderful to have you among us today.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Now, I think I'm having some problems here. Okay, it's okay now. No, still some problem. It is now fixed up. Well, I'm sorry for the disturbances. Professor Dr. Paromita Mukherjee is currently Assistant Director and Head of Amity Institute of English Studies and Research, Amity Institute University. Literally, she has had a very glorious year in her academic odyssey. It's almost impossible not to be envious of her rich scholastic achievements so far. She has earned its own unparalleled merit and endeavor. She holds a double MA, and one of which she has done in English rhetoric and professional communication from a world-class institution, New Mexico State University, USA. And then she completed her PhD with flying colors from one of the best universities in the world, University of Florida, US. Professor Mukherjee's doctoral work is on 20th century British women writers, which very prominently features in the title of this workshop itself. Her current research and teaching interests include 19th and 20th century British and Irish literature, gender studies, contemporary critical theories, Indian immigrant writers, children's literature, folklore, professional communication. I gather and love to share with you all today that she received Certificate of Achievement for Outstanding Academic Accomplishment from the University of Florida International Center, USA, for five consecutive years, beating some of the best native academicians on their own soil. It is absolutely, I would say, a phenomenal achievement, something that we can really think of or dream of, nothing more. She is a regular contributor to a large number of national and international journals, newspapers all across the globe, and has been attending numerous invitations, delivering talks in various prestigious institutions, in seminar, workshop, conferences, symposiums in India and abroad. I wonder, personally, like many others, that Professor Mukherjee could easily have settled her illustrious career in some of the best academic institutions in America itself, and or in some European countries. But I don't know what brings her back home, denying some of the most lucrative offers over there that she only knows. And this might be another secrecy or mystery that we are going to deal with the topic. In a sublime career as an academician, she has earned a very vast and diverse teaching experiences for nearly 2 decades in various prestigious institutions in the world. I don't know whether I've been able to do justice or not, but I know my limitations to sketch an appropriate picture of her academic achievements. Well, today we are so deeply honored, privileged that she has agreed to grace this limited effort, this web workshop. We have been joined by more than 150 students, scholars, academicians, educators, research scholars from all over the nation. So today, the topic that I already gave a hint that she's going to deliver her much awaited talk is on Agatha Christie's The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, a critical analysis. And this is going to be, I'm sure, an absorbing session.
Hey,
We have
Babu.
no way to be absolutely captivated in her brilliant articulation and deliberation.
হাত ধুয়ে আয়।
Before ma'am comes in, a condolence message is to be delivered by Dr. Anirban Bhattacharya, Departmental Head of Shantipur College. Dr. Bhattacharya, please.
Thank you. It is with great shock that we have received the news of sad demise of Sri Kashikanta Moitra, and the distinguished politician, academic, and lawyer who was the son of Pandit Lakshmikanta Moitra, the founder of Shantipur College. On behalf of the college community, I convey my heartfelt condolences to the bereaved family, friends and colleagues of late Kashikanta Moitra,
এরকম করে অ্যাডমিট করবে, হ্যাঁ?
who has been one of the chief patrons of the college,
এখন না, যখন আসবে তো।
and we mourn the passing on of a distinguished son of the land, Shantipur, who has left an indelible imprint on the history of the locality and community. May his soul rest
এখানে
in
প্রেস
peace.
করতে হয়, তুমি এখানে প্রেস
With
করতে
this note, we will move on to the technical session. I again cordially welcome
কেন
Professor
থাকতে দাও?
Mukherjee,
মাউসে তো নাড়াচ্ছ কেন?
and it is really our privilege, honor, and pleasure to have you as the research person. Thank you.
I hope I'm audible. Am I audible?
Yes, perfectly, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Anirban, and thank you, Professor Roy, for that generous introduction. And I am very sorry to hear about the demise of your patron. So, but I guess we have to continue with the session. And so I would like to share my screen. So please let me know if this is
দাও।
Are you able to see the screen?
You are not visible, ma'am. You can see the screen, but you are not visible.
Someone else is presenting. It is showing.
Yes, somebody might be there. It is my request, whoever he may be, please, let ma'am come forward and deliver her speech. Yes, now you are visible, ma'am. Go on.
I'm visible? Okay, so I will try to share my screen now. Is my PPT visible now?
Not yet,
No,
ma'am.
not yet.
Now?
Still not.
Okay.
Is it visible now?
Ma'am, you are visible, but not
Not
any
the
other
PPT?
thing. Not the PPT.
I'm not sure why it is not coming. I guess we have to do without the PPT then.
Oh, it is going to be another mystery, full of mysteries, that what goes wrong with the PPT. Ma'am, you are quite beautifully visible, but not the PPT yet,
Not the PPT, so I am not sure what to do now without, I can continue with my talk without the PPT, or because I am sharing from my screen, but it seems that it's not showing. In that case, yes.
Yes, if Sumita is available, Sumita, if you are online, can you fix it? Sumita, our technical support team head, Sumit Ray. Sumita, are you there? Can you fix it anyway? Because ma'am has designed her lecture, I'm sure, with this PPTs,
Shumita, please allow her to present the screen.
Yes.
Present the
Yes.
PPT. I think it should be allowed. It has to be allowed.
Should I just go ahead with the lecture?
Yes, ma'am, with great pleasure, but it would have been better if you had got those PPT as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you operating from Mozilla or Chrome? Google Chrome.
Chrome.
Okay, and it should have been visible.
Right.
It should have been visible. Yeah. There must be something going wrong.
Because I am sharing my screen, so I don't know why it is not visible. Let me just cancel and try again. I guess I have to do without the PPT then. I'll go ahead.
Okay, ma'am. We don't mind. Go ahead.
Okay. So popular fiction studies, I will start. I have designed this lecture thinking that my primary audience will be the UG students. So I'm going to start with popular fiction and then go into some features of detective fiction and then finally move into the text. So popular fiction, crime fiction and other established genres of popular fiction such as romance, thriller, science fiction, horror or western, they have drawn extensive attention from a variety of disciplinary and methodological perspectives. And popular fiction is often subsumed under the umbrella of popular culture. But popular fiction can be defined in so many ways, especially during the second half of the 20th century. It has undergone, various transformation, a huge transformation. the contrast between popular fiction and literature occurs against the backdrop of this continuing debate about the category of low and high culture. How do you distinguish between a literary novel and popular fiction? Can it be both? I mean, then, these high and low terms, the so-called high and low terms, usually they stereotype popular fiction and has been questioned by many critics. However, most would agree on the basic distinction that a novel is a popular fiction if its success is measured by the public and its publishers, as much as by its sales and the devotion of the fans by its authors, as opposed to like timeless literary quality. But we will see that many of the popular, so-called popular fiction, they have already attained a timeless quality. And perhaps the primary debate surrounding popular fiction is the significance of significance and meaning of the genre. And in magical narratives, romance as a genre, Frederick Jameson argued that genres are essentially contracts between a writer and his or her readers, or rather they are literary institutions like other agreements or contracts. Now, there are other writers also who have talked about this. For example, Ken Warhol, in his Reading by Numbers, Contemporary Publishing and Popular Fiction, claims that genres are simply convention-bound and formulaic. Now, we all know that whether it is romance or it is detective fiction or in any of the genre fiction, these are primarily based on some sort of formula. And also these kind of texts are very much reader oriented, and they are dependent on the unpredictability of the readers. This is usually meant for some light reading, with attractive covers. I'm sorry, I cannot share the PPT because I had collected some pictures of those attractive covers. And they are usually the page turners. Most of the time, people, they, while traveling, they pick it up from the airport, maybe for just light reading. And that itself, and popular fiction, if you think, it can be as a form of cultural production, it can be understood in the terms of industry, publishing industry, popularity that is reaching a large mass, and also entertainment, some sort of escapism from the reality of life. And these writers, the basic point is that these writers, they publish a large number of books within a very small period of time, and that boosts the publishing industry. They are written with a sense of achieving some sort of worldwide fame or recognition, and also obviously the entertainment angle, where people want to read them just to escape from the kind of sorrows of life, and kind of take refuge in a world of imagination. Now, these there are these bestsellers, or they have immense public demand, and the genre, the category specifically appeal to certain specific category of people. And the readers, there are specific readers for specific genres. And the whole process of this popular fiction, it depends on three things: production, distribution, and consumption. Obviously, one is reminded of Adorno and Horkheimer's the culture industry. So now I'll move from here to the codes of the genre, the generic codes. Usually they, if you take a point of view from the structuralist or narratological perspective, then or if you take the approach from that side, then expectations. Uh,
আরে ধ্যান ছাড়া এমনি তো হয় না।
oh, okay. I think there was someone else talking. All right. So, so then we can focus uh, on the different approaches from narratological or structuralist, approaches, and we can see that several archetypes are, created. Several, from the stereotype itself, several archetypes are created. Adventure, for example, in adventure, there will be always some sort of victory over death. The hero will always, go through several, trials and several hardship, and finally he will, reach his destination, or if he is going to get something, he will achieve that and he will be triumphant in his endeavor. Then if you look into mystery, there is always this rational solution to all sorts of problems. Then romance, there is always, love is always triumphant in romance. And in sci-fi we see that there is a new land is conquered, basically. So we see that in these kind of fiction there is a kind of continuous, on one hand there is originality, on the other hand there is a lot of repetition. And there are several other types of fiction as well, like the hard-boiled detective fiction as opposed to the classical detective fiction. Then there is this adventure, the Western adventure, westerns, and then the other type of crime fiction, Roman noir, and also thrillers or suspense stories. And the medium, we can see that film, TV series, literature, mass market paperbacks, through several medium, these kind of stories are portrayed and they reach the larger audience, the public. Now, if we so the if we kind of look into the 19th century forerunners of detective fiction, you will see that Edgar Allan Poe, the three names obviously come to mind. One is Edgar Allan Poe, another is Vicky Collins, and the other one is obviously Arthur Conan Doyle. Now, early 20th century, that is 1920s and 1930s, this is called the golden age of detective fiction. It kind of profusely produced too many detective fiction during that time. Too many writers were writing. To name a few, there will be Anthony Barclay, Freeman Wilcox, Ronald Knox, Philip MacDonald, Austen Freeman, Agatha Christie, Dorothy Sayers, Georgette Hare, and so many other names that come to mind. Now, these people, they were writing detective fiction. They kind of fall into this category of classical detective fiction. I'm not going to go into the hard-boiled detective fiction. So this classical detective fiction, they kind of follow the same formula, and then they become they produce several books, and they become extremely popular. And later, one example of a later thriller will be, say, James Bond, Ian Fleming. So that will be another example of thriller, not necessarily detective fiction. Now, Agatha Christie, in her lifetime, she wrote I guess several books, 80 plus books that include both crime, detective fiction, short stories, plays, and her play on Mousetrap, for example, that was immensely successful. It is probably one of the world's longest running play. And Agatha Christie was writing during the World Wars, and during the two World Wars, she was working as a hospital in the hospital dispensary, and that is the time when she acquired a thorough knowledge of poisons, and that keeps featuring in all her novels. The way she uses that knowledge in her novels, that is very interesting. And obviously, she also came up with two very interesting characters. One is Hercule Poirot, who the world famous detective, and the other one is Miss Jane Marple. And Hercule Poirot was first introduced in Mysterious Affairs in Styles, which was published in, I think, it was written in 1916, published in 1920, and then The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, the text in our discussion today, that was published in 1926. Before I get into the text, I want to talk a little bit about the kind of what is the reader's expectation from a detective fiction. Now, Todorov, he talks about the typology of detective fiction, where he talks about the binary within detective fiction, and he talks about that there are two types. Rather, he talks about three basically. One is the who done it, that kind of category, and he juxtaposes it against the thriller type, and there is another one, the suspense, which is kind of a combination of both. These are subgenres of detective fiction which he mentions, and he clearly marks that whodunit has its focus on the crime and the investigation, and the thriller makes the reader wonder with curiosity. Now, whodunit fiction it focuses on two stories. The first part of the story, it is the crime, before continuing to second part of the story, that is the investigation. Whereas thriller fiction, it combines the crime and the investigation together to offer a more compelling drive between the reader and the text. And Todorov also mentions that the first type is more about absence, and the second one is more about excess. First one is more about like first type is more about what really happened, and the second one is how the reader or the narrator has come to know about it. So the conventions and literary devices, for example, the author cannot leave anything unexplained, as opposed to justification and naturalization of devices, like author must explain that a book is being written, and the style is to be kept neutral and plain. So these are the things which Todorov points out as to be the typology of the detective fiction. And I wish I could show the PPT because I collected so many pictures. But anyway, so the next part that I want to talk about is the art of detective fiction. Obviously, this is again something. By the way, I would also like to mention that Todorov he quotes he quotes one particular dogmatic author. He calls him dogmatic author of detective fiction, S.S. Van Dyne, who wrote in 1928 that he had kind of laid down several rules for detective fiction, and few of them which Todorov points out, they are that the novel must have at least like at most one detective and one criminal, and at least one victim, that is a corpse or a body. Then the culprit must not be a professional criminal. For a classical detective novel, the culprit cannot be a professional criminal. He must not be a detective, and he must kill. It can be a crime of passion. He must kill for personal reasons. That was another very important rule laid down. The third one is that love has no place in detective fiction. You should not be dealing with love. Although we see that in detective fiction there are a little bit of love angle thrown in here and there, but the detective cannot fall in love. Okay, and the culprit must have certain importance in life. Like you cannot be a butler or a maid. You have to be someone very important. So in the book, it must be one of the main characters. That is another hard and fast rule. And everything must be explained rationally. Fantastic is not admitted in detective fiction. And there are no place for descriptions or psychological analysis. And in the story, the homology must be observed. That is, the author equated with the criminal as if, and the reader equated with the detective. So the clues must be set in such a way that the reader feels like he or she is the detective trying to resolve the mystery. And of course, banal solutions, banal situations should be avoided. So these are few basic rules that Todorov pointed out. And there is a very interesting book, a very good resource also for the students, that is The Art of Detective Fiction, which came out in 2000. It's edited by Warren Charnock, Martin Swells, and Robert Villain. It came out from Palgrave Macmillan. That book, it is a collection of several essays, and it's a wonderful book for students who can use this for their research on detective fiction. Now, if we go into the art of detective fiction, we see that a detective fiction must have a rattling good story. It should not be kind of limited to hermetic, but there has to be like broader issues of moral, legal, and cognitive. It is a genre which attracts the love and attention of both academic and other readers alike. So I'm sure it's difficult to find a person who does not enjoy detective fiction. So at one level, a detective story is definitely a rattling good story. The reader cannot put the book down because of sheer compulsion to find the explanation. And at another level, the detective story, it enshrines the perennial hermeneutic of the narrative mode, which works with deep structures of change and stasis, and of the ongoing moving events and retrospective reflections of mystery and its resolution. Now, within one within the simple, or the I would say simple term, the plot-driven interest and excitement then for the detective story is that of surpassing durability. We all know that plots have this tendency of, the events may not account for always some sort of fascination, but in the detective story, the narrative mode of onward moving events and retrospective reflections of mystery and resolution, that becomes absolute necessity. And the essential appeal of detective fiction is that the entire chaos, the mayhem of criminality, and then the transgression, violence, carnage, death. So all these things, they become the essential appeal of detective fiction. It is, this criminality or mayhem, this chaos which has been created, that has to be resolved. That is the whole purpose. And the parameters of order should be like the social and the literary conventions and rational explanations. They must be provided in the detective fiction. It addresses our inborn sense of guilt, some sort of when we are prone to darkness rather than light. So that's the reason why probably the readers enjoy detective fiction. And death, there has to be death, where it is acknowledged by the dismantling of body, mind, personality, selfhood. and the body itself becomes very important point in our in a detective fiction, because it is the material stress, it is the material trace which can become an instance of judgment. Okay, and the battle of rationality and logic with irrationality of psychological prompting, that's another thing that people look forward to. There are other types of detective fiction where you will find that seriality plays a very important role. For example, if there is one death, there has to be another one. Okay, and then the urgency of chase becomes important because the murderer has to be caught before he kills again, right? And the retrospection of the past events, that also become very important, because what appears random may have a pattern and coherence, and the familiar motivations of murder, greed, ambition, jealousy, obsession, and the unfamiliar reasons as well. So all these things, they combine together, and if they are all put in together in a systematic manner, then it becomes a successful detective fiction. On the surface level, in a detective fiction, you will have lots of data, lots of clues when the dead body is suddenly discovered, and then the figure of the detective, very, very important. The figure of the detective, and interesting. It has to be interesting by the virtue of his or her relationships or the lack of it. Keeping the tainting world at an arm's length. So he cannot be very closely involved. He has to maintain that objective detachment. And also, there is always, often, not always, but there is often a friend or a helper, like Sherlock Holmes has Watson, Hercule Poirot has Hastings, so like that. These are the things that we normally look forward to in a detective fiction. Now, when we come to the murder of Roger Eckroyd, you see that this is the third Hercule Poirot mystery by Agatha Christie. And Poirot appears in he appears in 33 of the novels of Agatha Christie, and Murder of Roger Ackroyd is the third novel featuring Poirot, the most influential crime novel, with a twist at the ending that that leads to the controversy. It was well received. The reception was extremely well, but then there was a lot of controversy regarding this particular text as well, because it had a twist at the end, like when the murderer is discovered. And Poirot's last novel was Carton, which was published in 1975. That was Poirot's last case. He died in that particular novel. So now, when we come to the actual text of Murder of Roger Ackroyd, of course, one has to talk about the plot, how well the plot construction is done from the very beginning. Obviously, that is the charm of a detective fiction, that you cannot reveal who the murderer is until the very end, right? Because you have to let the reader feel like a detective. The reader has to, try to go through the clues and try to, solve the mystery by himself or herself. And at the very end, when the detective also explains who the killer is, the reader may also, feel that get that satisfaction. Yeah, I guessed it too, right? So the next thing is so obviously in Murder of Roger Ackroyd, we see it's a very well constructed plot, and then next we see this the setting or the locale. It is set in a quaint town, in a village, King's Abbot, where Hercule Poirot has retired from his service, and he just takes his time off from the city life and wants to grow vegetable marrow. That's why, and he is the neighbor of Dr. Shepherd, right? So there, the setting, the locale itself, this small town, this village where people are nosy, they want to know about each other, and then there is this interesting character Caroline Shepherd, who is the doctor's sister, who keeps tab of everything what is going on in the village. They know about each other's business. They make sure that they know about each other's business. So this setting becomes important for the text itself, because the crime is happening here in the small town where it was not expected, and Poirot was already, in retirement. He was just taking his time off, and then he gets drawn into this whole mystery. The concept of the criminal narrator, that becomes a very, very important point in the text itself, because I'm assuming all of you have read the text, so I'll just go straight into the criminal narrator. Now, Agatha Christie, in her autobiography, which came out in 1977 after her death, there she mentions that the idea actually came from her brother-in-law. Her brother-in-law had, just finished reading one detective novel. He had put down the novel, and then he tells her that almost everybody turns out to be criminal nowadays in detective stories, even the detective. What I would like to see is a Watson who turned out to be a criminal. Now, Agatha Christie mentions this in her autobiography and says that this probably gave her the idea. And then there was another letter from Lord Mountbatten to Agatha Christie, which also suggests to be the murderer. So these are the two things which actually kept Christie thinking about how to create that kind of a murderer. And she thought a lot. That is what she writes in her autobiography, that she thought a lot, but she was unable to make Hastings. She thought that Hastings will not make a believable murderer. He cannot murder someone. Hastings' character was already constructed in such a way that he cannot become a murderer. So what was the other alternative? So she kept thinking, and she also kept in mind that narrative that was to be constructed in such a way that it would not be cheating. And although the controversy related to murder of Roger Eckroyd, it points towards that kind of a cheating. A lot of people said that this is cheating. The narrator itself becomes the criminal. So, but how Christie defends herself, she says that the little lapses of time, as there have to be, are nicely concealed in an ambiguous sentence, and Dr. Shepherd, in writing it down, if we look at the very end, we will read that section, that when Dr. Shepherd is writing it down, he took great pleasure himself in writing nothing but the truth, though not the whole truth. That's why the last but one chapter is and nothing but the truth, right? The last but one chapter is the whole truth, chapter 25, and chapter 26 is and nothing but the truth. So this concept of criminal narrator, this is something that just did not come to Agatha Christie's mind suddenly. She mentions that the idea had come from two people, but then she started thinking, and she was finding it extremely difficult to finally construct the criminal narrator. But she did a wonderful job, and from the very beginning, I think, as readers also, it was extremely difficult for us to guess, when you are reading the novel for the first time, to guess who the criminal is. And if we then think of the figure of transgressor here, the detective or the criminal, because in the novel we see that continuously Hercule Poirot, while he starts his investigation, he is keeping Dr. Shepherd always with him, as if Dr. Shepherd is, taking the role of Hastings, right? So he keeps mentioning that also in the text. If you have read the text, you know that it has been mentioned. So that itself kind of shows that that how the criminal narrative, how the criminal narrator at one time he is the criminal. On the other hand, he is also being the detective, and he was trying from the very beginning to trying very hard to make Poirot fail. Okay, so he did not want Poirot to succeed. So next, um, if we think of the suspects in Roger Ackroyd, in the murder of Roger Ackroyd, there are several suspects, all the people who were living in the house, including the butler. But as per the convention of detective story, a butler is not important enough to, kill someone, or the maid, or the, uh, there was this chambermaid, and there was um, Miss Russell. So these are the characters which ultimately would not be the uh, criminal. But then the family, who the immediate family members, and also the secretary and Mr. Blunt, all these people, they had motives. Their motives were being checked continuously, re-evaluated by both the narrator, which is Dr. Shepherd, and by Hercule Poirot. So that murderer, these suspects had to be eliminated one by one, and that happens at the very end when Poirot calls everybody, and then, but he was in the beginning, he was continuously in discussion with Dr. Shepherd, and Dr. Shepherd was also keeping a very close tab on Poirot's investigation, and then we see that. At one point, the narrator, Dr. Shepherd, mentions that from now on, Poirot went his way and I went mine. That means Poirot was not sharing bits and pieces of of his investigation with Dr. Shepherd. And the other interesting thing here in this particular text, and Poirot in general, the representation of Poirot, he is always shown as this outsider, this Belgian with egg-shaped head, the non-English outsider. He is described in many places as the foreigner, and so and he is also posing a challenge to the figure of the typical masculine detective, which was already in fashion during that time. And so Poirot's character is offering a completely, not only the outsider element, the foreigner element, but also he is kind of shown as a very quirky person, someone who has his own idiosyncratic ways of uh, talking, walking, and everything. And it is also shown in the TV series and in the films as well, which were later adaptations. And here, another interesting point to be noted, which Agatha Christie also mentions in her autobiography, that this evolution of this character of Miss Jane Marple, which probably had its roots in Caroline Shepherd, who is the sister of Dr. Shepherd. And she mentions in her autobiography that I think it is possible that she mentions that she thinks that it is possible that Miss Marple arose from the pleasure that she had taken in portraying Dr. Shepherd's sister. In fact, Caroline had been one of her favorite characters in the book, an acidulated spinster full of curiosity, knowing everything, hearing everything, the complete detective service at home. When in fact, continuously throughout the text, you have noticed that Dr. Shepherd tries to keep information away from Caroline, although Caroline somehow finds the information. Somehow she has this exceptional ability to kind of gather information. And at one point, ironically, Dr. Shepherd mentions that information she does not have to collect, information just comes to her. Okay, so that is very interesting. And so later, when we read other detective fiction by where the detective is Miss Jane Marple, we see that these kind of traits actually can be, traced back to Caroline. Another important point, which Agatha Christie also mentions, that the point of a detective fiction is what? At there will be chaos, there will be murder, but at the very end, moral order has to be restored, right? So it is any detective fiction is like a old everyman morality tale. And she mentions in her autobiography also that when she began writing detective stories, she was not in mood to criticize them or think seriously about crime. It was more like she was just following the convention that the detective story was the story of a chase. It was also very much a story with a moral. In fact, it was an like a old everyman morality tale, and the hunting down of evil and the triumph of good. And at that time, when she was writing, when she started writing her detective fiction in 1914 onwards, during the war, the doer of the evil was not a hero. The enemy was wicked, the hero was good. It was as crude and as simple as that. And you know that was not the time when the writers had started wallowing upon the idea of psychological you know maneuvers. And she said that she was just writing like everyone else who wrote books or read them against the criminal and for the innocent victim. So that she mentions in her autobiography. And that actually we see that in her other novels it is very much done like that. But later on we see that although she may not focus on the psychological aspect, but as readers we do feel that we need to look deep within the psychology of the detective here, because he's not the detective, sorry, the criminal, because it is the psychology of the criminal that becomes important for us. In this particular text, another important point that one needs to refer to is this whole introduction of the new technology. That is the whole idea of this dictaphone. Now, how that is used, dictaphone is something that came up during the First World War. The sending messages, coding, dictating. Now, several of the women writers of the First World War, during the First World War, like Elizabeth Bowen, and later after the Second World War, like Muriel Spark, all these writers, they were also actively involved in the international politics. Like they were, Bowen was herself working as a spy, whereas both Bowen and Muriel Spark, they were working for the British Intelligence Service, where they needed to decode and encode messages. So it's interesting to note that how women writers, they were collecting information from their experience, and then they were using it successfully in their text, in their in the literary text that they were writing. So about the text itself, this is I have mentioned the important points. And I also wanted to show you something, but again, because I could not show the PowerPoint, so I don't think I'll be able to show any clipping or video. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the adaptation also. So this Murder of Roger Eckroyd, it has been adopted. It has been adapted as a stage play, then as radio play, as film, and the most successful TV series, which where Hercule Poirot, the role was played by David Sachet. It's the ITV series in UK, and then there in most recently in 2007, the graphic novel also came out of this particular text. So this text has appealed the readers for a very long time, and it is still appealing. And it is wonderful to see that in the last few years, this has been included as a text in the UGC syllabus of the universities. So we can see that the appeal is not just as popular fiction, as popular as an entertainment, but also there is academic interest in it as well. So in now Agatha Christie in her autobiography mentions regarding one adaptation the stage play, which was named Alibi, um, the adaptation of Murder of Roger Eckroyd. That was to be produced. It was adapted by Michael Morton, and he had given the initial suggestion, that about 20 years of Poirot's age needs to be taken off, and Poirot should be called Beau Poirot, and have lots of girls fall in love with him. And she strongly objected to that idea. She said that no, that is going to completely destroy the personality of Poirot. And so later they came into a compromise. They settled upon removing the character of Caroline, the doctor's sister, and replacing her with a young and attractive girl. Even that, Agatha Christie mentions that even that she resented, because she liked the part that Caroline played in the village life. So I guess, and I also wanted to talk about a little bit about the adaptation um, in the TV series that happened in 2000. There, several changes were made from the text itself. For example, we see in the adaptation itself, the focus is completely on Poirot, whereas in the novel we see, because it is the narrator who is the criminal, and because the criminal narrator is narrating the entire story, so obviously the focus is on him, and it is he who is observing everything and noting down things, but with obvious exclusions. The truth is noted down, but not the whole truth. And but in the TV series, they kind of focus the entire thing on Poirot itself. The other thing is that the butler is killed off in the TV series, and Dr. Shepherd is also not shown much as a helper. In the novel itself, we see that how Poirot takes Dr. Shepherd into his confidence in the beginning, and kind of Dr. Shepherd is very close to Poirot, in the investigation. So, but that is not there in the adaptation, and the point in the TV series, the way it has been shown, it starts with Poirot reading the manuscript and probing into the criminal psychology of a particular of this particular person, Dr. Shepherd, and then the entire story happens in flashback. So that is again something which is, and also in the TV series, he is killed off. Dr. Shepherd kills himself off. He first tries to escape, and then he kills himself off with a gun. And her sister actually helps him to get the gun. The gun was in the car box, in the car gloves compartment, and from there she gets hold of the journal as well as the gun, and she carries it to the place where the investigation was being made. And there, he confesses, obviously. Dr. Shepherd confesses, and then he runs away with the gun. He tries to shoot people, and then he tries to escape, and finally he kills himself off. Now, I think that this kind of adaptation, where he finally tries to escape and then kills himself off, whereas in the novel, obviously, it is indicated that he will kill himself off, because in the last line, in the final chapter in Apologia, in the last few lines, he says, "And then what shall it be? Veronal, there would be a kind of poetic justice. Not that I take any responsibility for Mrs. Ferrer's death. It was the direct consequence of her own actions. I feel no pity for her." So there is no remorse for for Mrs. Ferrer's death, but that he mentions that whether it is going to be veronal or not, and he mentions the poison. And here in the adaptation, it is clearly shown that he kills himself off with gun. So there, I think. Somehow when you read the novel, you feel that at certain point you somehow feel to some extent maybe a little bit compassion for the criminal narrator, but in the text, in the adaptation itself, I don't think that is possible. So this is where I would like to end, because if you have any questions, I would like to take them. I hope I have been able to give you enough to think about.
Thank you, Professor Mukherjee. This is interesting and insightful. This is absolutely in parity with the conception and motto that we have initially conceived of. Very much in connection with the workshop, the conception we have earlier thought of. And so I would invite students and audience to unmute your microphone and put forward your questions, comments, or reflections on the analysis of the text and the story or the narrative as well. It is really, really interesting. Thank you so much. One common question which is ever made, that is, what's the connection between Agatha Christie's mode of analysis and Sherlock Holmes and that of Sherlock Holmes? Is there any connection, or they are totally disparate?
Well, the mode of description, well, both of them, they follow the conventions of detective novel, no doubt about that. But I think the major attraction in the major point of difference will be the portrayal of the detectives. You know, Sherlock Holmes is eccentric in his own way, whereas Hercule Poirot is eccentric in his own way. But seems again there is a point of similarity here because both are eccentric in some point. So I think I would explain like that.
Okay. If you have any other question, you please unmute your microphone and then put forward. I think the students must have some questions or comments regarding this analysis of the text.
Respected ma'am, as you say that Mrs. Ferrer is constantly psychologically contemplated that Dr. Shepherd is blackmailed Mrs. Ferrer and she committed suicide. So can we take it as a direct murder or it's not a murder? So can you please elaborate my doubt?
Well, can you call it a murder because it was suicide, and at the very end also, Dr. Shepherd does not take any responsibility for her death. In fact, he himself thinks that this was the she deserved this fate because she herself had killed her husband, slowly poisoning him through several months, and so now she deserved her fate, and she needed to die. So she does commit suicide, but then she could have just kept on giving money to Dr. Shepherd, right? Or Dr. Shepherd, it's not that Dr. Shepherd drove her into this suicide, but I think Dr. Shepard wanted her to be accountable for what she had done. So it's kind of Dr. Shepard's own moral justice that kind of comes into play here. But again, that is in contradiction to the next, murder which he does when he kills off Roger Ackroyd, because it was just then he was trying to, hide him from being exposed, right? So I don't think you can really call Mrs. Ferrer's death a murder. It is a suicide, so it is a suicide.
Oh, ma'am, can we
Yes.
see here is a cycle of karma that just because first and all a suicide is committed by Mrs. Ferrer and then Dr. Shepard is trying to hide his work and murdered Mrs. Roger Ackroyd, and then he wants to not confess his guilt and sorry ma'am, he also committed suicide. So a cycle is constantly accumulated here.
Yes, you can say that, because ultimately, see, what is the aim of a detective fiction? There will be a lot of chaos, but finally, order has to be restored. Okay, so what could have been any other option? Dr. Shepard is the kind of a man who would not want to go to jail, and Poirot gives him a chance. If you look into the text carefully, Poirot gives him a chance, and it as if Poirot kind of suggests that you commit suicide. So that is what he does. So eye for an eye, it seems. So whether it is karma or whether it is some sort of revengeful act, that needs to be mm, you know that is debatable.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Ma'am, at the end of the story, it means Dr. Shepard's crime at least exposed to everyone.
No, that is not how the novel ends, because Dr. Shepard is kind of sure that not everyone will come to know who had killed, that he was the murderer, because he says that I would not want my sister to know about this, and I am sure Poirot and the detective, they will manage somehow. That is how he ends the novel, if you read carefully. So whether it is exposed or not, is that remains a question, and in fact that led to another controversy. That is not what you expect from a regular detective novel, because the order is restored, the detective the criminal dies, but uh, death cannot be the only punishment, right? Because whether it is exposed or not, that is ambiguous at the end of the novel, whereas in a normal detective novel that does not happen.
Except the detective only his sister knew that only about this incident.
No, the sister also doesn't. In fact, he says that I would rather prefer my sister not to know about this. She will be able to deal with the tragedy of me dying, but I don't think she will be able to deal with the fact that I am a murderer. That is what, if you read the text carefully, that is exactly how it is being said in the last, where he talks about the apologia. That is the chapter 27, where he says that I think, let me just read this section. My greatest fear all through has been Caroline, because he was afraid that Caroline will be able to expose him. But I have fancied she might guess. Curious the way she spoke that day of my strain of weakness. Well, she will never know the truth. There is, as Poirot said, one way out. I can trust him. He and Inspector Raglan will manage it between them. I should not like Caroline to know. She is fond of me, and then, too, she is proud. My death will be a grief to her, but grief passes. So, any sister will be grieving her brother's death, so that will be a general death. But knowing that your brother was a murderer, that will be another kind of grief, another level of grief, which he wants to spare his sister. But he leaves it on Poirot and the inspector. So whether they will expose it or not, that is not clear. But that is not in the doctor's hands, because he is going to die. He commits suicide.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am,
Yes.
can you please elaborate the psychological condition of Dr. Shepard? Just because, ma'am, when you elaborate the text, you just say that he does not want to come into the limelight as a murderer, but he um, just published herself as a victim who just committed suicide for some reason. So what kind of psychology is going on? He just keep on murdering and just
See, his only intention was to show this as a failure of Poirot. He had been writing this manuscript from the very beginning, and Poirot tells him that you finish that manuscript. So he finishes his manuscript and then he dies. Okay, so he wanted to be the writer, because Poirot stories are written by Hastings, right? But now it will be this story is written by the criminal himself. So he needed to be true to the narrative, and so he mentions that in the narrative, in the manuscript itself. So what kind of a psychology it is? That is a question that we all have to think, but I don't think we can come to an answer. I am not. I'm not sure that when it is another. You can say that it is one form of criminal psychology. That is all I can say as of now.
oh, thank you, ma'am.
But his original intention was continuously to show that he is better than Poirot. That is the reason why he kept on misleading and giving clues in other ways, so that Poirot was confused. But Poirot is another egotistical detective who continuously says that it is impossible to hide anything from Hercule Poirot. He keeps saying that. So yes, at the very end, Poirot does find out, and he kind of confirms his ability, no doubt about that. But I think Dr. Shepard was kind of in his own twisted mind, he was kind of in competition with Hercule Poirot. So if you say this, what kind of psychology it is, I think this is his psychology, because he is a doctor, he knows everybody's lives in the country, and then Poirot comes and settles down as a as a neighbor. So he just wanted an upper hand on Poirot, that you have come from the city, you have solved so many cases, but I am better than you. So I think he wanted to establish that. So if that kind of a competitive mentality he had.
Ma'am, is this the impact of World War Part 1 and Part 2, which the Agatha Christie's go through?
World War II has not happened yet when this novel was written. World War I has happened. The novel was published in 1926, so it was after the First World War. So during the First World War, actually, during the both First World War and Second World War, this whole theme of betrayal and a lot of fiction was written during that time, which actually talked about these anxieties and trauma that people faced during the war, and nobody was to be trusted, and this game of this was the time when people also needed this whole idea to be a whole idea to be reinstated, that the moral order will be restored There will be always this good over evil. So I think people like Dr. Shepard, on one hand, he was trying to punish Mrs. Ferrer. On the other hand, he himself did something, and he is not necessarily remorseful here because he did not have very high opinion of Roger Ackroyd also, because Roger Ackroyd is shown as again another a very egotistical man who would just want his wishes to be followed. That's the reason why, without even taking into consideration the feelings of his stepson and his niece, he decided a marriage between Ralph and his niece, right, Flora. So he was kind of trying to play God here, right? Because he was trying to play God here by ruling over other people's lives, and I think Dr. Shepard also wanted to stop him from doing that. I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, ma'am. But here, so Dr. Shepard is also doing the same. He is also act like a manipulator. He
Yes.
also tries to manipulate everything. So what's the difference between he and whom he murdered or whom he punished?
I don't think I understood your question.
And my question is, as you said that whom Dr. Shepard is murdered is a manipulator or is try to put his power to everybody, show his power towards everybody. But Dr. Shepard is doing the as he murders everyone and just try to just keep justice to everybody. But he also a murderer, so he also play a role of manipulator. So
Yes,
what's
he
the
does.
difference? What's the difference between he and whom he murdered?
Well, then comes the question of chaos and law and order. Roger Eckroyd did not break the law, whereas Dr. Shepard did break the law.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for your elaboration. Thank you. It helps us a lot. Thank you, ma'am.
Any other question?
Ma'am,
Can you just explain?
ma'am, besides a crime fictional novel, can we say that the story is a tragedy?
Actually, yes, you can to some extent say that, but then the first, you can go back to Oedipus. He was the first tragic detective, you can say. So yes, any discovery is tragic. Any discovery of this kind is tragic, and so you can say this is in the there is a tragic note in Dr. Shepard's case. Yes.
And at last a tragic doom.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Shreya, I am unable to understand what you said because your voice broke.
Can you please explain this sister of Dr. Shepard as a
I am so sorry. Can someone repeat the question?
I think, ma'am, I think, Shreya, you can write down the question in the text. We can put it forward to her. Actually, your voice is breaking down, not quite clear to understand. So you had better write down the question in the text and we can forward it to her. It's absolutely not intelligible. Well, ma'am, it's been such a brilliant lecture. We have been just like a detective story itself. You kept us, very much absorbed, and it's so informative and so joyful. All the way, you kept us very much attached to every moment of your lecture. You know.
I
Such
am
a
so
beautifully
sad
designed
that I
lecture.
could not show the PPT. I had so many pictures, and I also wanted to show you, the students' certain video clippings. You know, for some technical difficulty, I don't know what happened. Usually, I'm able to share, but I don't
But
know.
we never felt that something is lacking in it. We never felt something is lacking. It
That
seems
is
to
very
be so
kind of
complete
you.
lecture, you know. And I have a
Thank you,
question,
sir.
ma'am. You know, it might be a bit,
Yes.
you know, out of box. The question is, we all know that T.S. Eliot had been an addicted reader of detective stories all
Yes.
through his career. And in detective story, primarily, a reader is challenged to resolve on his own. He is challenged, you know. And it is full of obscurity and all other things are there in order to make it, you know, mysterious. Now, if you look at the poetry written by T.S. Eliot, we find almost some sort of nature, because his poetries are so famously difficult to, you know, decode, and it challenges the reader to get the meaning of it. It is full of replete of clues provided all through the poem. If you talk about the Wasteland or many other poems, you know, do you think there might be some kind of influences of his, you know, reading habits of detective stories that might have influenced him to, you know, design his poetry? Is there any possibility of being, you know, influenced by his reading habit of detective poetry? What is your, you know, observation on this particular issue?
I think that's very interesting the way you put it. Yes, it is possible. Ultimately, as readers, whenever we read any literature, we always work as detectives, right? Because we are always trying to find clues, like what the
Yes.
author or the poet has tried to say, or what is the meaning of this particular imagery or symbolism. So I think we all play the roles of detectives there. So I guess what you are saying, there is a possibility because he was influenced, and it's very difficult to find a person who has never enjoyed reading a detective story. So that is the appeal of detective stories. So the
One
influence
of
is
the,
possible.
yes, it is one of the easiest things to be addicted. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your reflection on the issue.
Hello, Shubhatada.
We have another question from Shreya. Ma'am, can you please explain Caroline as a precursor of Agatha Christie's female detective,
Yes.
Miss Marple?
Yes, if you, that's a very good question. If you read the text carefully, you will see that from the very beginning, Caroline seems to be, and the way Dr. Shepard describes her, that Caroline seems to be the real detective here. She is continuously, keeping herself informed. She is curious. She is always, she herself does not need to, that is what Dr. Shepard says, that she does not need to even collect information. Information just comes to her. But she keeps herself informed, and she always has her own observations and speculations, and she comes up with her own logical reasoning and deductions. And she keeps saying that, oh, this is not going to happen, oh, that is not, like, she's the first one who said that, oh, the marriage between Flora and Ralph Patton is never going to happen. And so she seems to have this uncanny ability to understand the human psyche and also the actions, and from her keen observations she is able to interpret those actions and the future as well. She speculates the future, and most of the time in a correct manner. And there is a chance that she was probably very close to guessing that what has happened with Dr. Shepard, or the real nature of Dr. Shepard. Dr. Shepard, that's the reason why with everyone else it was different, but with Caroline, Dr. Shepard was extra careful, because he knew that if anyone can expose, if he can be exposed to anyone, it is Caroline. So definitely that is where the seed of a good detective lies. And Agatha Christie herself mentioned that in her autobiography, that from Caroline only the whole idea, that probably took shape as Miss Jane Marple later, who is kind of a busybody who keeps tab on everybody's lives and who has an innate understanding of people's nature, and she can speculate people's future actions. I hope I have answered your question, Shreya.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
So this is really interesting, and the most important thing about detective fiction is its consumption, which is materially filled via different modes of production, and there is a shared sense of connection between the being of the reader and the being of the detective, and that is constantly being materially filled, a kind of embodied feeling.
Yes.
And when we watch that detective fiction in the mode of performance in theater or in movies, we also feel that kind of sharedness, that kind of connection is there already there. So this is very interesting. The consumption of the detective fiction is circulation and production, which
Yes.
is again goes with the logic of the capital.
Absolutely.
That is really interesting. So this is an informative, absolutely informative and insightful topic, insightful lecture, and that again goes with the conception of the workshop that we have conceived of. So we have with us our principal, respected principal, Dr. Chandrima Bhattacharya, from the very beginning, and we have earlier shared her message and message of condolence of Sri Kashikanta Moitra, and now microphone is over to Professor Momita Vishwas.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Am I audible? Okay. Okay. This lecture and this Q&A session was indeed fantastic. Dr. Paramita Mukherjee's engaging and extremely well thought, informative lecture has introduced us with different aspects of detective fiction as a popular literature genre. Such fantastically detailed analysis surely will help the participants in development of their critical mind. Dr. Mukherjee's critical examination of the text, both in terms of structure and form of the text, as well as discussion about those engaging adaptations, will surely initiate students' spirit of learning in their future times. We are extremely grateful to Dr. Mukherjee for her wholehearted engagement with the participants. On behalf of Organizing Committee of IQAC and Department of English of Shantipur College, we thank Professor Mukherjee for such a well-thought, thorough, academically engaging and informative lecture. We thank all the participants, faculty members and research scholars who have been with us in this session. It is our heartfelt request to all the participants to stay with us like today. Please share your insights and engage with our eminent resource person like today. It will be extremely enriching experience for everyone. Thank you all.
Thank you, Paramita ji. Thank you, Subrata. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you all. So we would move on tomorrow to the final session, final day. That we will discuss about the syllabus, the structure of the syllabus, exam preparations, and enhancing learning thing. So thank you, everybody. Thank you all.
Thank you, Anirban,
Thank you,
and thank you, Shantipur College, for inviting me. This was an enriching experience for me as well. I love to interact with the students. So thank you, Anirban, for having me here.
Thank you all.